Today I'm going to talk a little bit about paint and applying paint, but not so much in terms of its color, but in terms of how thick or thin the paint is. So here's an example of putting on paint quite thick. Put it on like this, or put it on like that. And you'll see when it goes on in these ways, there are little ridges. The paint tends not to go flat when it's very thick. Whereas if I were to thin the paint, it'll be a much flatter. I'm just using an old canvas that I use for demonstration purposes. But with thin paint, even though it's a little tiny bit lighter, the important thing is actually goes on much more evenly. There's an old adage, fat over lean. When I'm doing paint early on in the underpainting or the early stages, it's very good to stay nice and thin. I can use thinner, I can use medium, or I can just be more mindful of how I apply the paint. When it comes to a later time, then I can put the paint on much thicker and have impasto, have layers. But on this thick paint, it would be very hard to put other paint on top of it. It would either overblend if it's still wet, or it would these ridges would show through no matter what. Whereas here, when I put paint on top of that, nothing shows through and it stays the same basic thickness. So the big thing to remember about fat over lean is start with thin paint. It'll give you a lot more control to do layer upon layer upon layer, and only towards the end, if that's the effect you want, then to do like you have under here, the thicker paint, because that will be the impasto surface, and you're not worried about putting something on top of it. All right, so that's the tip around thinness versus thickness of paint. Thank you.